guess. All right, let's get to our PPR rankings for running backs. Kai.
Yep, got it. All right, we're live.
All right. So, first up, number 1 should be a surprise to nobody. Christian McCaffrey, number 1 across the board for all three of us. I mean, it's pretty goddamn obvious. Christian McCaffrey is the best player in the NFL. He was the best player in fantasy last season. I mean, maybe you could say Tyreek, but it's either him or Christian McCaffrey. I think running back still more often than not is going to win out if there's like I think Christian McCaffrey is the number 1 player, just period. I thought from what I've seen, most mocks I've seen, he's usually the number 1 guy that goes off the board. I expect that to be the case. And I don't think there's really an argument to take anybody over him. I don't know if you guys feel about that, but yeah, that's how I feel about Christian McCaffrey.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm taking him number 1 overall if I have the opportunity. And I mean, if you are lucky enough to have that opportunity to get Christian McCaffrey, you absolutely should. It's a no-brainer. I mean, if he's on your team, you're more than likely making the fantasy playoffs unless your team is just like dog shit. And then your chances of winning the championship is that much higher with Christian McCaffrey on your team, provided he plays a full healthy season.
That is, I still think it's crazy that in PPR he wasn't the number 1 scoring player. I mean, like, you have 2 guys ahead of him. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But those guys are wide receivers, quarterbacks. Like, sometimes wide receivers and quarterbacks have better years. But man, Christian McCaffrey, I would agree that he's probably, for fantasy football, he's the best player. Like, consistently, you know he's going to score some points. I mean, 2,000 scrimmage yards and 21 touchdowns last year with 67 receptions.
Mm-hmm.
He's playing. He's an RB1 and a wide receiver 2. Put them together.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you get the production of both of those types of players. So, I definitely agree. Christian McCaffrey's the 101 in most drafts, depending on your scoring and stuff. So.
He had a career high in receiving touchdowns last year, and he finished with 14 rushing touchdowns, which was second in his career. So, I mean, I last season, I think, is probably his best season of his career. Most rushing yards, too.
And most importantly, he played 16 games. Not a full season. Played 16 games, though, is...
That one game that he missed was only because they sat the starters.
Yeah, that was a rest game, wasn't it? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I guess it didn't even matter for fantasy, but he played a full season.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, that's crazy.
And even if he gets injured for like 2 to 3 games, that's still a successful CMC season.
If you can if you could squeeze 14 games out of CMC in a fantasy season, you're doing really good for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Let me just go right down his 16-point totals last year, okay? 26, 22, 23, 48, 13, 14, 22, 30, 20, 21, 31, 22, 16, 42, 25, 13. Pretty good, dude.
Basically, his lowest scoring game at 13 is like a decent scoring game.
Yeah.
For any other running back. Like, if any running back scores you 13 points, you're like, okay, I could work with that, dude. And that's
Sign me up.
Likely to have that.
Bam.
You're more likely for him to score 30 points than 12 points.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
That is crazy. Yeah.
Yep. Draft CMC if you have the opportunity.
Don't forget too. He's also like the best. He's in like the best offense, if not, a top 5. Like probably the most consistent offense at the very least, if it's not the best. So, he's a no-brainer number 1.
It's crazy that
the 49ers don't win the Super Bowl, dude.
I was gonna say it's so crazy that the best player in the team is also on one of the best, or the best player in the league is on the best team in the league as well. It's just like, it's nuts.
Maybe that coincides.
Mm-hmm. Oh, is he on the Chiefs? I didn't realize. Number 2. Number 2, Breece Hall. So Kai and I have him at number 2. Dylan has him at number 3. So I must ask, why do you hate Breece Hall?
I don't hate Breece Hall. I don't hate Breece Hall at all.
The numbers say differently, friend.
If I had him ranked number 10, right? But
I'm just going by higher or lower, and you're lower than me and Kai, so I don't know, man.
I'm going to ask the same thing in the next one then.
I guess we'll see then,
What I have to say is, he's good. I don't think he's like he's not spectacular, dude. He's not. He's
What?
not.
Oh,
like, the
I don't.
most- He's not a spectacular.
I don't know about that one.
I disagree. Yeah, he's really
Well,
good.
Okay.
I think he is
Okay.
spectacular, and
We'll
I think
say
he's
that.
gonna have I think he's gonna have a better quarterback this year. I think he's gonna have a better offensive line this year. I think the offense is just gonna be better in general.
He just wasn't
Uh,
a touchdown machine like maybe you would want
I mean, he plays for the
as your
Jets.
as your RB2. What I'm saying is, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think his touchdown projection is slightly lower than maybe some of the other running backs on this list. And I think a lot of his production last year came from receptions, as you can see. Like 76
That
receptions
ain't
is
no
a
problem.
lot. That's a lot. But I think that will change with Aaron Rodgers being healthy. I don't think he's going to catch like Aaron Rodgers might not be checking down like Zach Wilson was.
I mean,
That's fair.
that's a fair point. Yeah.
But he also might get more touchdowns out of it too, because the offense is going to be moving in a positive direction a lot more often than not.
They
And
might be in the red zone more. But
Mm-hmm.
And they
I
did.
think he
They
still
did.
is going to get a good amount of receptions.
They did improve the O line this year too, so I do like
Mhm.
that going forward as well. Yeah.
His yards per carry last year 4.5.
Pretty decent.
223 carries, 994 yards, 5 rushing touchdowns, 76 catches, 591 yards, 4 receiving touchdowns. I don't know. I thought Brees Hall was really good last year in a pretty bad offense.
Yeah.
And I think he's going to be even better this year in a pretty solid offense. I think Aaron Rodgers is only going to help him.
Yeah. I mean,
Personally.
I agree with Dylan here. I do think that the pass catching role is going to devalue a little bit here, but I do expect the rushing efficiency to go up way more this season.
Fair. But I think he's going to be one of those more touchdown dependent than maybe some of the other running backs on this list.
Okay,
And
I
just have
don't
to rank him.
agree, but I don't agree, but I don't hate the take.
Okay.
Kai, do you want to say something about Brees Hall?
No, I mean, it's just no brainer. I mean, this is someone that you would definitely want as your RB1 if you don't get Christian McCaffrey. So if you have the opportunity to take Brees Hall, I do love the upside quite a lot this season. Like I just said, I think the rushing yards are going to go up. I think the rushing touchdowns will at least be in the double digits, and he's still going to get some pass catching work, just not as much as last season.
This
So,
is current ADP late first round. He's not going in the late first, is he?
that's
Going early first.
No, late first.
No?
I was seeing it mid to late first.
Behind some wide receivers.
Yeah.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
I must just be in, I don't know. Every mock that I've seen, he's been like number 2 or number 3. So I don't know. Maybe I'm the outlier. If it's wide receivers in front of him, that makes sense. But I don't know. I've seen Brees Hall go as high as 2.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
to do with that what you will. Next up, number 3, Bijan Robinson for the Falcons. I have him at 4. Kai has him at 3. Dylan has him at number 2.
Yeah.
I'll tell you why I hate Bijan so much. No, I don't hate Bijan. I just there's a lot of questions about Bijan Robinson unfairly because most of the questions involve how Arthur Smith had used him last year. Arthur Smith, of course, is gone. So you would think now that Raheem Morris will probably use Bijan Robinson a lot more often than Arthur did. So in theory, I think we all three of us think Bijan Robinson is a good player. He is probably going to be a really solid player this year. I would absolutely draft him in the first round. I just like Brees Hall more than him. I like Christian McCaffrey more than him. And I personally like Jonathan Taylor more than him too. Not sorry to spoil that, but he's my personal number 3, Jonathan Taylor. I just think Jonathan Taylor's going to have a really nice season with Anthony Richardson. That's all. Other than that, I think Bijan Robinson is going to be really good. Just wanted to explain myself that's why I was the lowest on him of the 3 of us, but still my 4th running back. I think Bijan's gonna be great. I would draft him no brainer in the first round personally. Dylan, you have him at number 2. I'm gonna let you go ahead and talk about Bijan Robinson. Why do you like him so much?
Speaking of like Brees Hall, you know how he's kind of getting an improved situation. So is Bijan Robinson.
Mm-hmm.
So I think he walks into an offense that is probably a little bit more explosive. Would you say?
Yeah,
a little bit more explosive. I think that's going to open up the field a lot more because I believe with Desmond Ridder as the quarterback last year, and I was at Taylor Heineke too. to
Mostly Ritter, yeah.
there was a lot of stacked boxes against the Falcons. You know what I mean? Like, teams weren't like, oh, we got to put 5 back in coverage because Desmond Ritter is going to rip our guts out. No, so I think that with opened up offense, better play callers, maybe a better philosophy when it comes to the run game, we could see Bijan. I think he has a huge chance to lead the NFL in rushing yards. Right. So I know CMC has the ability to rush for 1,500 yards, but I think Bijan has that as well. His athleticism is through the roof. I would say he's probably the second most athletic running back in the NFL behind Christian McCaffrey. I think they're basically clones of each other. He has the same skill set as Christian McCaffrey does.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just like, can they access that? Yes, I believe they can. So he could be the RB1. Not this year, but going forward the next couple of years.
I mean, it wouldn't shock me if we ended the year and he was the number one fantasy player. So yeah, I agree with everything you're saying, honestly. Kai?
Yeah, no, I mean, pretty much everything Dylan said. It's the improved situation. He lands behind a great offensive line. Atlanta did rank very highly in their offensive line rankings, and as far as I know, the unit is still very much intact. Yeah, I don't know. I just see a huge year for Bijan. I kind of expect these stats to kind of be the same, except way more rushing yards, probably way more rushing touchdowns. I kind of expect the pass catching value to stay about the same because there's a lot of weapons in Atlanta. But
he's going to have a lot more receiving yards.
Oh, I could believe that one, yeah. But I think like 50 to 60 receptions is probably right about what I would expect from him this season. Yeah. I just love it, though.
This is a guy that can go 1,000 and 1,000, damn near. Like 1,000 rushing yards and like 800 receiving yards. He could be flirting with the 2,000 yards scrimmage yards and 12 touchdowns-ish. You know what I mean? So
I could see it.
I like him this year.
Last year, in I don't want to say minimal usage, but less usage than I think most of us thought that he would get and thought that he should have gotten. 17 games played, 214 carries, 976 yards, 4 touchdowns, 58 catches, 487 yards, 4 touchdowns. So just imagine if he was used as often as people thought that he would be used. He probably will be producing at a very high level, especially with like another year under his belt. He's going to kind of know how the NFL feels this year going into it. So I definitely think Bijan is going to be very good fantasy player this year.
I would agree.
Moving on. Our number 4 running back, Jonathan Taylor. So I have him 3. Kai has him 4. Dylan has him 6. The way I looked at it is I thought Jonathan Taylor had a really nice year last year. Anthony Richardson's going to come back. I think Anthony Richardson's a good quarterback. I think he was just starting to get it going a little bit last year. Like, he definitely didn't have like the best passing numbers, but he was still making impact on the game. He was putting up fantastic fantasy numbers. I think if Anthony Richardson can come in and like, really, I don't even think he needs to get his form back because I'm not even sure he was all that like sharp and crisp and that good to begin with when he got injured. He was really doing a lot of his damage on the ground. So it's not like he has to come back and get up to par with where he was before. He kind of just has to get back to how he was going to progress anyways in his rookie season. I think he's going to be a good player. I think that the Colts offense is going to be moving really well with Anthony Richardson as a rushing quarterback, Jonathan Taylor as a top 5 running back in the backfield too. I just think the Colts are going to have a really good rushing attack, and I think Jonathan Taylor is going to benefit from that. So that's what my thinking was personally. Honestly, I think like Bijan and Jonathan Taylor are just like interchangeable in my mind. I don't think I really technically have one over the other. I just gave Jonathan Taylor kind of the edge up. They're both basically like in that same tier for me, where I would be happy with either one of them. Let's say I was picking like 6th overall, whatever, and they were both there. I'd be like, I'd be happy with either one of these guys. So I personally like Taylor just a tad bit more than Bijan, but they're basically the same player, same production in my eyes.
I was going to say you could get Jonathan Taylor a little cheaper than Bijan too, because I do agree with you. I do think that they're very similar players with very similar play styles. The one reason why I do love Jonathan Taylor a lot this season is, so Shane Steichen, who's over there, we saw him turn Zach Moss last year into a thing for like a good half of the year. And then the year before that, he turned Miles Sanders into an elite player that season when he was with the Eagles. So it's like, I do love the way that this guy develops running backs, and I do think a full season of Jonathan Taylor with Shane Steichen is going to be great, and I would not be shocked if Jonathan Taylor finishes number 1 this year.
Say, yeah, Shane Steichen, by the way, UNLV guy.
Oh, really?
Yeah, used to play quarterback for them.
But yeah.
Nice. I have him ranked so much lower than you guys, just off of having this be PPR rankings. I think he slates a little bit lower than some of the guys just in PPR. As for pure rushing, he's probably one of the better pure running backs in this league. He might be pretty much equivalent to like Derrick Henry, and if Nick Chubb was healthy, he's that kind of running back. Like he's that good in my opinion. But it is close. Like this top 5, 6, 7 players, for the exception of one, is pretty close. Like I think all these guys are going to probably rank pretty close at the end of the year points wise. But I just see Taylor maybe not having that edge in the receiving game.
I mean, we have seen seasons though where he does dominate in the receiving category, you know.
His best receiving numbers came in 2021, which was his best season as a pro. That was his 1,800-yard rushing season. He had 40 catches for 360 yards and 2 touchdowns, and those were all career highs, catches, yards, and touchdowns. So
okay.
I thought the same thing. I was like, Jonathan Taylor's not that good of a receiver, and I looked at the stats. I'm like, I guess not. I wouldn't say he's not a good receiver, but he's just not used in that way by the Colts. So
also, that season, that 2021 season, his 1,800-yard season, he was the RB1.
Mm-hmm.
He was the lowest scoring RB1 in fantasy football history.
I mean, does that say anything about him, though, or is that the rest of the league? I feel like that's not right to shit on him for that. That's not.
But it's just a statistic.
Okay.
I still like him. Like, I'm drafting number 7. You know, if I can get him on the swing around, or even maybe, you know, like
Dylan's like, let me actually explain how 1,800 yards and 18 touchdowns isn't good.
Well, I'm just saying, like, that's what I mean. Like, he could be the RB1, right? But it's not the RB1 season you would expect out of Jonathan Taylor, out of any player, really. Like, it's not a CMC year.
I mean, 1,800 yards and 18 touchdowns is pretty good, though.
That's pretty damn good.
That's pretty good.
It's not bad. He still is like very dependent on his rushing skills though. And I think that's why I slot him a little bit lower than the guys with more passing upside. That's all. I would still take Jonathan Taylor on my team.
That's fair. Yeah. Just for the hell of it, his yards per carry year by year, 5, 5.5, 4.5, 4.4. It's all pretty consistently pretty good. He definitely is an elite rusher. I get the point that you're making with the receiving game, though, Dylan. I definitely see what you're talking about. Next up, Saquon Barkley is our number 5 running back. I have him at 5. DP has him at 4. Kai, the Eagles fan, has him at 8. Kai, why do you hate Saquon Barkley?
I do not hate Saquon Barkley. I love Saquon Barkley. I love the talent.
The numbers say different.
Okay, but hear me out though, because obviously Jalen Hurts and the tush push. If that is still a thing,
it's not a legitimate football play.
Whatever. If that's still a thing going into this season and it works effectively as it did last year, Saquon Barkley is probably going to lose 8 to 10 touchdowns due to Jalen Hurts vulturing it via tush push. So that's basically the only reason why I have Saquon lower. Other than that, the guy is a machine on the ground. I do love the situation. This is the best offensive line that he's ever had in his career, and the guy is a PPR monster too. So
how many touchdowns did you say he might lose?
I'm going to say 10. I'm going to say 8 to 10.
He only had 6 last year. He had 6 rushing touchdowns last year.
No, I'm saying he's going to lose them this year because of Jalen Hurts with the tush push.
Jalen Hurts is going to vulture 8 touchdowns from Saquon Barkley this year.
I'm saying there's a possibility,
I think the possibility
if he has 8 less touchdowns, he's going to have like -2 touchdowns.
No, I was talking about this season.
I know. I'm just fucking with you.
Dude, what do you think? What do you think about Saquon Barkley, Brian?
I'm a notorious not drafter of Saquon. I just don't. It's not really his fault. It was more of like the Giants are just really bad, and also Saquon does have an injury history, so that didn't help either. If he had an injury history on a good team, it wouldn't have really scared me that bad. But the Giants just always had O-line woes, so there's like an aura around Saquon Barkley that my brain goes, don't touch him. if I was ever going to draft him, I think I would take a chance on him this year just because it's the Eagles. But after talking with Kai the other night when he was telling me about this theory that he has, I was like, damn, that's a pretty good point. And like, if the Eagles fan doesn't even really like him that much, which granted, he's still his 8th running back, so I'm being facetious a little bit, but I'm like, maybe. So Kai kind of talked me off it a little bit more. And like I said, I already have my doubts about Saquon just like seeped into my DNA just from the last few years of playing fantasy football. Like I said,
this could
he's
also,
not my favorite, but I think he is going to have a pretty solid season for the Eagles.
That's what I'm saying. This could also still be really good, though, too. Like, Saquon could just ball out behind this fantastic offensive line and just score from outside of the red zone consistently, you know?
Or the Eagles could, run the ball on the goal line with the running back that they signed.
I hope so. Yeah, there's every avenue of possibility is open here with Saquon.
You sound crazy, Dylan.
I sound like a lunatic. Yeah. Is it also lunacy to see Saquon Barkley finally get back into that form? Playing with this situation isn't the same, but this definitely reminds me of CMC joining the 49ers.
Mm-hmm.
And on a lower scale, of course, because CMC kind of came in like the best running back in the league still.
Yeah.
Into that offense. So Saquon might have that opportunity, but it would not surprise me to see Saquon score 20 touchdowns this season.
Yeah.
No, definitely not. Yeah.
Like 12 to 14 rushing touchdowns and 6 to 8 receiving touchdowns. Like, that's doable. I think he's going to be a monster in that offense. And also, I think Saquon Barkley being on this offense is going to open up their playbook so much.
I hope so.
Because now they have an absolutely real rushing threat outside of Jalen Hurts.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, this guy's going to scare you when you don't know who to watch. You don't know that the RPOs and stuff like that those little plays in that offense, who do you pay attention to, Hurts or Barkley? It's going to be a nightmare for some of these defenses to keep up with. So just by proxy being in that offense, I think Saquon probably has his best year he's had since his rookie year this year. And I want to be on that train as soon as it starts. I don't want to have to trade for this guy.
Yeah.
Later in the season. I want to have him on my team this year.
Fair enough. Just so they're out there, 14 games played last year for Saquon, 247 carries, 962 yards, 6 touchdowns, 41 catches, 280 yards, 4 touchdowns on that pretty bad Giants team.
That was a really bad Giants team.
Next up, number 6, Jahmyr Gibbs. I have him at 7. Kai has him at 6. Dylan has him at 5. So I guess we'll start off with you, Dylan. Why do you like Jahmyr Gibbs so much? I mean, obviously he's a great player, but how do you feel about Jahmyr Gibbs that has him so high on your list?
Oh, man. Efficiency, touchdowns, and receiving work.
Okay. Are you worried about Monty at all, though?
Yes, and as we get on in these rankings, you will definitely see where I think the presence of David Montgomery will prevent Jahmyr Gibbs from being the RB1.
Okay.
It will prevent him from being it might keep him on the fringe of the top 5 as well. I know he was the number 10 running back in fantasy last year, but he has a chance to push his way up just because he will get on the field more. He'll get more than 200 carries.
Yeah. You remember how that changed throughout the year? Because at first it was like, oh man, Jahmyr Gibbs isn't getting played at all. They drafted this guy 12th overall. They're not even playing him at all. David Montgomery's getting all the work and doing well too, by the way. And then as we got later in the season, Jahmyr Gibbs just started doing really good. Like, let's say this is just fantasy wise. Week 7 he had 27 points. Week 8 he had 29 points. Then they had a bye week. Week 10 26 points. Week 11 21 points. And then he had a couple more 20-point games at the end of the season too, in weeks 15 and 16. So it's like this guy, he obviously started showing like why they drafted him in the first round. Everybody was very critical. Critical is the word I was thinking about. They're very critical of them for doing that, drafting a running back so high. And at first, when it wasn't really working out, they were like, "What were the Lions doing?" And then they kind of proved everybody wrong. Jahmyr Gibbs is an excellent running back.
I mean, if you were to tell me that I'm going to draft a running back number 12, we said number 12 overall, and he's going to get you, let's just say like 1,200 plus, like 1,200, 1,250 scrimmage yards and 11 touchdowns, you're going to be like, that's actually really good.
Yeah.
And I think his receiving, his touchdown efficiency will go up The more he's on the field and the more he knows the playbook and stuff, he already shows he has the physical capabilities of scoring touchdowns and having explosive plays. So I think that'll only increase.
You got to imagine those receiving touchdowns are absolutely going to go up too. We only had one last year.
Absolutely.
52
catches for three. Oh yeah, go ahead. 316, one touchdown. Yeah. So I don't know.
You're gonna look at, I think, more receptions, more yards, and more touchdowns for Gibbs this year. Maybe the carries stay the same, but he's gonna flirt with 200 again, just because Monty is going to get 200 carries.
Mm-hmm.
There's not a universe where David Montgomery plays the full season and doesn't get 200 carries.
I agree with you. Campbell likes him too much.
Yeah.
Too much of a dog.
He is, dude.
Yeah.
I just want to have it noted real quick that if Monty was not in this offense, I would have Jahmyr Gibbs in the top 3 for me personally. Yeah, but this is...
I think I would too.
Yeah, I mean, everything is going to go up this year, like you were saying earlier. He's not going to experience a slow start getting out on the field this time. Like, they're going to start him from the fucking get-go.
And also, I saw something very interesting. It was Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery training together. And it was a video of David Montgomery teaching Jahmyr Gibbs how to carry the football. Now, I don't know if you guys know this, but David Montgomery just doesn't fumble. He just doesn't fumble. He has like 2 or 3 fumbles in his career, I believe. It's not that many. Then Montgomery is like ball security. And I think if Jahmyr Gibbs can learn to carry the ball better, that'll only increase his efficiency in fantasy football, because I know that's a big problem for young running backs is ball security, but
he has 8 fumbles in 5 years. So yeah, pretty good.
That's not. I definitely I only remember a couple, but it's very rare that
he's never had more than 2 in a season.
Yeah, which is
that's fantastic.
Really good.
Yeah.
The thing is, though, they've lost all of them but one. Almost every single time he fumbles, it's a turnover.
Well, that's because it's
not his fault. It's not his fault. Yeah.
Oh,
all right. Good takes. Good takes. Next up, number 7 on our list, Kyren Williams. So he's got the foot injury going on. I'm trying to decide how much I'm reading into that. I think I'm panicked a little bit about it personally. Running backs with feet injuries can always be a little... athletes in general with feet injuries, football players, basketball players, you name it. The foot injuries are just tricky. So when you add that he's a running back, I don't know, man. They also just drafted, Blake Corum, a 3rd-round pick this year. So, like, he's available to be used. Like, Kyren, a lot of Kyren's success came from the fact that they literally just didn't have anyone else they trusted on that team last year. So, like, if Kyren Williams would have played all 17 games last year, I think he probably would have been the number 1 player.
Yeah.
At least the number 1 running back. Just from usage alone. Like, he was so consistent when he was on the field. They were using him a ton. Like, literally, his snap rate was in the 90s, which is unseen for running backs these days. That foot injury, though, man, there's just something about that that's telling my brain, be careful about this guy. How do you guys feel about that?
Yeah, so, I mean, this is something that I could consider a mistake that a lot of people make when they're drafting. I think they let the injury concerns scare him off too much. You know, kind of like what you see with CMC every year. It's like you draft him knowing that he has injury concerns, and you're just like, please just give me a full season or at least 3 games missed at the very least. I kind of feel the same way about Kyren Williams. I think sometimes you just got to put that fear in the back of your mind and just take the talent. It's not your fault at the end of the day because you drafted the right guy and he got injured, you know?
Fair enough. Dylan?
I have to really take into consideration, like, I can't take injuries into consideration while making this list. So injuries were not a part of my thought process at all. So I took his foot out of it.
I think injury should be, though. No,
yeah,
it's a very important part of fantasy.
It's not
a bad in general.
I don't think it's a bad injury though.
Okay.
It's foot soreness. And if he missed 5 games last year. Had amazing numbers.
4 games. Wait, no, 5. You're right. He sat out in week 18. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he missed 4 with injury.
So he didn't play. He missed 4 with injury.
It's not bad.
Mm-hmm.
It's still like crazy numbers. So even if I did take injuries into consideration and take into consideration he missed 4 games, then I do a 12-game sample size. And what I'm looking at here is the number 7 running back in fantasy. Still.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, even if he misses some games, he's still going to get crazy carries. He's still going to get crazy yards. He's a very efficient running back. I'd say his receiving numbers are going to stay the same because of Blake Corum. I think Blake Corum is going to bite into his receiving numbers a lot, and so is Boston Scott. So I don't see him as much of a receiving threat. So I would downgrade him just slightly from Jonathan Taylor. I think that him and Jonathan Taylor are going to have eerily similar rushing seasons because they're the same type of running back, which is crazy because Kyron Williams is so much smaller, yet he is a very efficient running back, which is kind of hard to do. So it makes sense why he does have a little injuries. He's a smaller guy. He's under 200 pounds, I believe.
It's 5'9", 194, yeah. Only 2 games last year with single-digit fantasy points. Week 3 against the Bengals and Week 5 against the Eagles.
That was well before he was hyped up anyways, too, so it's not a bad thing. Yeah.
So, I mean, Kyron Williams, he was basically the superstar of my fantasy team last year. So, like, I love that guy. I would take a chance on him again, but the foot injury does concern me just a little bit. I'm just being real. Would it stop me from drafting him? No, but it definitely, if that foot injury hadn't happened, I mean, I would pick him in a heartbeat without even thinking about it. And it is making me question it just a little bit. So if it's like between him and maybe, my 8th running back on what did I rank Saquon or Kyron 8th? If it's between like the 8th guy and the 9th guy, I don't know. Maybe that might be the tiebreaker where I go, maybe I'll just go with this 9th guy. So I don't know. His stats last year, by the way, 228 carries, 1,144 yards, 12 touchdowns, 32 catches, 206 yards, 3 touchdowns for Kyron.
Monster.
Kai had him at 5, Dylan 7. I have him at 8 for our 7th overall. So number 8 for us, Derrick Henry. I have him at 6. Kai has him at 7. Dylan has him at 8. So basically all in the same
fantastic picture.
It is a great picture, yeah. On the Purple King's throne, I like that. I mean, honestly, this is either going to be amazing, like Derrick Henry's going to have one of the best years of his career, or it's just not going to work out at all, I feel like. So I think it's kind of like an all or nothing type pick. Maybe he just doesn't fit in with the Ravens or what they want to do on offense. You never know. We've never seen Derrick Henry in a different team. And I would say running behind Lamar Jackson is a lot different than running behind Ryan Tannehill or Will Levis or whoever else they've thrown out there in the recent years, Malik Willis. So I don't know. I definitely like Derrick Henry. I'm personally on the optimistic side. I think this is going to work out great, at least for one season. I think that the decline for Derrick Henry, just because of his age, is coming within the next couple of years. Could be this year, could be a few more years. Who knows? It's on the horizon, though. So this could be the last hurrah for Derrick Henry, or maybe it's already over, but I would still pick Derrick Henry. Why wouldn't you? He's one of the most dominant running backs of all time. Last year, 280 carries, 1,167 yards, 12 touchdowns, 28 catches for 214 yards, 0 touchdowns. Kai, how do you feel about Derrick Henry this year?
So there's 2 sides of me here when it comes to Derrick Henry in the draft process here. So the one side of me is the hesitant side where I'm like, okay, yeah, he's joining the Ravens. They obviously love to use a lot of different running backs, and Lamar Jackson takes a lot of carries just on his own. I'm worried about how that workload is going to look. And then the other side of me is kind of like believes what Dylan usually says about the Ravens. They've never had a running back like Derrick Henry before. Maybe their plans completely changed with how they normally run their offense, having a guy like Derrick Henry. And I think that side of me also thinks it's going to work out very well.
Dylan, how do you feel?
The more I've thought about Derrick Henry a lot.
People forget. Yeah.
People forget that I think about Derrick Henry every day. And I was thinking about Derrick Henry the other day and that Ravens offense and how he slots in. And then I start thinking about everybody else on the team. How is everybody else going to... and then I started thinking, I'm like, the Ravens have this guy named Patrick Ricard, who's a 6'3", 300-pound fullback that is an excellent lead blocker. What is going to happen to defenses when not only you have to shed the block of Patrick Ricard, but also tackle Derrick Henry right after? It's not going to happen. I think Derrick Henry will probably have a Derrick Henry season. He's not as efficient as other running backs. He's definitely not. 280 carries. Other running backs on this list have less carries and more yards, but they're going to beat up defenses so bad with this offense that it's going to be hard going down the stretch I think Derrick Henry could be the best value in the drafts if you could squeeze into the playoffs. Because if I want a healthy Derrick Henry going into the playoffs with these defenses that are beaten and bruised, having to just get smashed in the mouth.
He's such like a late season type of player, like that. You know, like when people just want to run the ball down your throat right before the playoffs and stuff like that. Yeah, I'm with you there.
He'll get the same receiving, maybe less.
Probably,
I don't think his receiving is going to increase at all.
I mean, that's never why you draft him anyways. So.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
But I think Derrick Henry could definitely have, if they could squeeze a 300 carry season out of him this year, they're going to, and they're definitely going to. So.
Yeah, you may as well. You may as well run him into the dirt. Yeah.
You have to. And I believe he probably wants to run himself into the dirt to win a Super Bowl.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
I'm with you. Also, keep in mind that he's just not going to have a whole lot of help in that backfield too, which is, you know, that makes it sound like a bad thing. It's actually a good thing for his fantasy numbers because Keaton Mitchell's not going to be back until at least mid-season, it sounds like. And they have like Justice Hill is basically like Justice Hill. He got playing time last year. He had a couple of nice plays. I don't think he's anything special. So in theory, Derrick Henry should be getting a lot of snaps, a lot of carries.
Oh yeah. And I think it's going to be mainly rushing. And I definitely, like I said, I don't think he's going to be a super efficient running back. He's going to be the battering ram, you know, that opens up this offense a little bit. So
yeah,
it's going to be touchdowns.
He's never been really known as an efficient back anyways, because there's two sides of Derrick Henry. There's the one that's going to rush for 200 yards, or there's the one that's going to rush for like 40 yards.
Yeah.
And have 2 touchdowns.
Yeah.
Either way.
And I've never seen a rushing stat line change so fast than Derrick Henry, because he'll have 17 carries for 42 yards, and then he will break a 75-yard touchdown. And then you're like, wait a minute. Now he has 120 rushing yards and a touchdown. So he's like that kind of guy that you have to be patient with, you know?
Yeah. All right, let's get to number 9 on the list. Travis Etienne. I have him at 9. Kai has him at 9. Dylan has him at 12.
I think that probably goes with his whole theory that the Jaguars are going to devolve this year.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah, I think Dylan just doesn't really like the Jags all that much. I don't know. Go ahead. Explain why you have him at 12.
Just very low efficiency. Very touchdown dependent back. I mean, the receiving is there, but he also didn't score very much. You know, he's like this jack of all trades running back. But he had very deceiving numbers last year. You know, you look at his numbers and you're like, the number 3 running back in fantasy, how? He has not that many touchdowns. He barely broke 1,000 yards. You know, what's going on here?
And
I think it's the ineptitude of Trevor Lawrence. And I don't think Trevor Lawrence is that good. I think, come on. I don't think he can. I don't think he's going to be a starting quarterback for as long as we think. Like, he should have been developed into a quarterback that can run an offense by now, but he's just shown that he struggles with that still. So it all depends on Trevor Lawrence.
I look at ETN's numbers too, and his touchdowns come in bunches. I mean, he had 11 touchdowns last year, but 8 of them came in 4 games where he just had 4 games with 2 touchdowns each. So he is a little boomer bust. He had quite a few single-digit games. I mean, the boom weeks are probably going to win you some games, but that type of player kind of drives me crazy personally, where he's gonna have 5 one week and then 25 the next week. I'd rather just have like 16 every single week personally. But I don't know. I still like ETN. I think he's very talented. I hear what you're saying about Trevor Lawrence. And I definitely don't disagree. I don't think I'm quite ready to just say that he's a bad quarterback. I agree with you that he should be better than what he is by now, and it's a little concerning for them. But I'm not all the way out on him yet. Like, it wouldn't shock me if he had a bounce back season. I still think that he has that in him. But I definitely see where you're coming from. And I see your point why he's lower than me and Kai have him personally. Kai, you're up there with me at number 9. How do you feel about Travis Etienne?
Yeah, so I do agree with a lot of the things that Dylan says, like his concerns with the Jaguars and all. And it's kind of funny that the number 3 running back in fantasy last year, I would still consider Travis Etienne to have had a down season last year. possibly through no fault of his own either, because as Dylan said with Trevor Lawrence and everything. However, still very talented player. I don't kind of believe all the smoke screens that Doug Peterson is saying that he's going to get less work this year. I'm just banking on talent here and Travis Etienne's growth going into his year 3 season in the NFL. So, yeah.
So how come you don't believe Doug Peterson when he says he doesn't want to use him as often?
Because I just think he's just too good to not have out there. I mean, despite the Jaguars' offense looking anemic at times, he was one of the few bright spots for a consistent portion of the season.
Who else do they have there? They have Bigsby, right? Is there somebody else there?
No, Snoop Connor? I don't know.
No, I don't think he's there anymore.
Okay. But yeah, other than that, as far as I know, it's just Tank Bigsby.
Okay, I mean, Tank Bigsby was a very popular, like, crush that people had last year, like in the preseason.
There was a lot of those last year.
He didn't really do a whole lot. I don't really think he got a whole lot of touches even. So I don't know. Let's take a look here at what Tank Bigsby did. He had 50 carries for 132 yards and 2 touchdowns. Not very good. So maybe they want to get him involved more. I don't know. I could see that just being a smokescreen, but then again, why would they even say that? I don't know. I think I would still pick ETN, but I definitely hear your concerns, Dylan, and I'm with you on that one too.
The Jaguars, they drafted an offensive lineman this year, right? In the first?
Oh, I don't remember.
Mistaken.
I don't remember. Do you remember, Dylan?
Not necessarily. No, I don't follow the Jaguars as much, but
yeah, didn't they get that Fashanu guy, or was that the Steelers?
I think that was.
Let me look it up real quick.
I got you right quick.
I think they got Brian Thomas Jr.
Either way, though, if they drafted an O lineman, that's going to be just that much better for Travis Etienne and his yards per carry, I think. So,
fair enough.
Yeah.
All right, next up, number 10, Devon Achane. We're kind of all over the board here on Devon Achane. Yeah. I have him at 11. Kai has him at 15. Dylan has him at 9. I'll start off here with how I'm feeling. This is all upside. Like, I mean, you could throw darts at a board for Achane or Raheem Mostert, whichever one is going to be better this season. I have no idea. I think Devon Achane definitely has more potential, and I think that you draft him this high based on just potential, period, because he is a good player in a good offense. He showed us what he could do in that offense last year. He didn't get a whole lot of because he's battling injuries all his season long, which is another thing that you want to be a little worried about. But in theory, if he plays a full 17 and gets way more touches than he did last year, Devon Achane could be the number 1 player in fantasy potentially. Yeah. I don't think that's a crazy thing to say. So this is basically like, if you're drafting Achane, you're drafting to try to win your league, because he could be a league winner. He could also, I don't know, maybe get injured in week 3 and just miss the entire season, or maybe just have a whole entire season where he's battling injuries on and off, and Raheem Mostert's also having a very good season again. This was Achane's stats last year. 11 games played, 103 carries, 800 yards, 8 touchdowns, 27 catches, 197 yards, 3 touchdowns.
Look at that yards per carry, though.
Dude.
7.77 yards per carry.
That's college numbers. Like, that's shit you see in college.
That's unbelievable efficiency. Yeah. 100 carries to average nearly 8 yards a carry.
Mm-hmm. Pretty crazy. So, and he also... lost my train of thought. I don't know. So that's how I would absolutely draft Achane. I think if you are drafting him, it's just like you're hoping that he's just going to hit and be amazing. And when you're drafting, you shouldn't draft scared. So like that's honestly, like, if Devon Achane went like in the back half of the first round, I would be like, that's a little crazy, but I get it. I wouldn't do that, but like that's the kind of potential that we're talking about with Achane. So Kai, go ahead. You're the lowest on him, so you tell me what you have him at 15.
Yeah, okay. So this isn't based off of drafting scared for me, but it's whether I want to take this gamble or not on Devon Achane, because it absolutely is a gamble. You're drafting him, and you're hoping he plays a full season or misses 3 games at the worst. If I got a guarantee that Achane is playing at least 14 games this year, I'll take him as my RB1 for sure. But he's also in that weird average draft position where, like, early third, that's kind of like RB1 / fringe RB2 territory. I don't know. How do you guys view Achane? Like, would you be okay with him being your RB1 on your roster?
No.
I could talk myself into it.
I'd be a little scared. I'd be a little scared if he was my RB1, but if I got him somehow as my RB2, this would be fantastic. Yeah, like I said, I'm not scared on it. It's just I have to decide whether I want to take this gamble.
If he was my RB1, I would look at it just with the highest upside. Where I'm like, if he has this best season, he would easily be an RB1.
Yeah.
So
it's a gamble. It's a gamble.
I wouldn't want him to be my RB1, but if he was, I could easily talk myself into that being a good thing. I don't think I'd be stressing about it too much. It wouldn't be my preferred situation, but I wouldn't stress about him being my RB1.
If you're picking at the 101, let's just say, and you get Christian McCaffrey, and then you loop back around to the tail end of round 2, and you get Devon Achane on your team, we can't let this happen.
Because that would be insane.
That is insane because at any given week, you have 2 different guys that could score 40 points.
Yes. Yeah.
And if that happens at the same time, you're ousting your competition with 2 players.
Yeah.
So I definitely look at him as like you kind of project his numbers. So if he's playing an extra 6 games, you got to imagine his carries are going to go up. He's probably going to get 180 carries, like the Jahmyr Gibbs role. He's much better than Jahmyr Gibbs.
Is he?
Look at it. I think so.
Okay.
Efficiency wise, when you look at the numbers, he had Jahmyr Gibbs' year in like 4 or 5 less games.
That's fair. And he isn't a crazy offense though compared to Gibbs.
He is.
Yeah.
And you have to imagine his receiving numbers are going to go up just a little bit. I don't like these numbers just kind of show me like, oh yeah, he's just an athlete in space. So this is a guy that you just get into space and he's going to score you a touchdown.
Yeah. The other part of me that makes me hesitant about Achane though too is like, what if last season was just like an anomaly, like just a bloop? You know, it's just
an anomaly.
That's a hard word to say.
Anomaly.
Do you think that season was an anomaly?
I'm just saying there's a potential possibility that it was. I'm not saying for sure. Yeah.
Okay. All right, let's move on to the next one.
By the way, this is how people felt about Tyreek Hill coming into the NFL.
True. Yeah.
Number 11, Joe Mixon. So Kai and I have him at 13 each. Dylan has him at 10. Last year, he was the number 6 running back in fantasy. 17 games played, 257 carries, 1,034 yards, 9 touchdowns, 52 catches for 376 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Joining the high-powered Texans offense, I would say little to no competition, too, just based on if Dameon Pierce is good or not, which he doesn't look good. He had a fine rookie year. Last year was not good at all. I assume he's not very good, or at least just like a jag. So I think Mixon's going to get the majority of the work. I think he's going to be excellent for Houston. I don't know. I feel like 13 feels pretty good. Dylan, are you just that much higher on him than us, or are you kind of feeling the same way we are?
I'm kind of feeling the same. I'm looking at basically he's probably going to have a very similar year.
Okay.
And he's stepping from an offense with 2 star receivers, a great quarterback, and him, right? And he's stepping into a team with the exact same situation. He's stepping into a team with a great quarterback, great young quarterback, 2 stud receivers, maybe 3, and then him. And he's one of the true 3-down backs in the NFL. You don't have to take Joe Mixon off the field during a drive. Like, he can run, he can catch, he can pass block. He knows he's always in the spot he needs to be. Like, he's a good running back. So if I'm just taking that and putting it into the Texans offense, you're going to get a similar season. Like, he's definitely a top 10 running back to me in the NFL.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's fair. Honestly, I mean, the Texans have a better tight end than the Bengals do too, and you said they might have 3 good receivers instead of 2. So I mean, he might even be stepping into an even more loaded offense than Cincinnati. So maybe, I don't know, maybe his numbers will decline. I don't think so though. I think he's going to have a good season. Kai, how do you feel about Joe Mixon?
So I know I have him ranked at 13, but it's a very optimistic one. Kind of like, I feel like in my heart, it's closer to what Dylan has him ranked as, just because I love the move to Houston so much. He's still one of the best red zone running backs in the league. Like, his red zone efficiency is like top 5 the last 3 seasons. Yeah, I don't know. It's just, and I love the average draft position that you can get him at right now. I personally think that's very, very low for Joe Mixon personally. Like, you could wait till the 6th round to get your RB2, which is Joe Mixon, and that's a fantastic running back too for your roster. So there's just a lot to like here on Joe Mixon.
Yeah, mid to late 6th round ADP. That's pretty crazy.
Like
I think he's gonna-
he could
that's gonna
arguably be a RB1 if he has a similar season, you know.
That ADP is going to jump up.
I agree. I don't see him lasting till the 6th.
Me either. Especially not if you're in a league where people know ball.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
Joe Mixon's not going to be there in the 6th round.
Yeah. I mean, we're not in one of those leagues, so he might be there for us. But
there's a couple people that know ball in our leagues, and me and you, Brian. That's about it.
Excuse me.
I'm just fucking with you.
I'm just kidding, Kai.
I'm
Number
joking.
12. I'm joking.
I'm joking.
Isaiah Pacheco is our number 12. This one's all over the board too. Kai and I have him at 10. Dylan has him at 19. Last year, 14 games played, 205 carries, 935 yards, 7 touchdowns, 44 catches, 244 yards, and 2 touchdowns. His current ADP is in the early 6th. Dylan, I'll start with you. Why do you not like Isaiah Pacheco?
I just got to say, like, he hasn't proven to me yet that, like, he's a better fantasy player than a football player. He's a football player. Like, if we're talking about ranking them as just running backs in the NFL, I would rank him higher. Right? But this is fantasy football, and he does miss games. He seems to be maybe that guy that hovers around 1,000 yards every year. He's not as efficient. Like, he gets a lot of receptions, but he's not super efficient in the receiving game. I could definitely see him finishing higher than my projections. I definitely think he will finish higher than 19. But when I'm slotting all these guys in, I just see a little bit less productivity in the passing game that's going to, like, limit his scoring a little bit. Not to say he's worse than the guys that are following him. I just think that maybe he stays in the mid-teens. Like, he's an RB2. He's not an RB1 to me.
Mm-hmm.
That's fair. I kind of feel like they're just going to give him a lot more work this year.
I do too.
Yeah, I mean, Jerick McKinnon's gone. They still have Clyde Edwards-Helaire, but McKinnon's gone. I think they trust Pacheco just a little bit more than they did before. I don't know, a couple Super Bowl wins might help that out. He only had a couple of, 3 games last year where he scored in single digits, and one of them was just under 10.
What's his high points last year?
His high points last year was 29.5 in Week 17 against the Bengals. 18 carries for 130 yards, 7 catches, 35 yards, and a touchdown.
Yeah, I definitely think like he has the opportunity to score those, but I think his opportunity to have high scoring games, like he's not gonna. I don't think he's gonna break that 25 point.
Well, let me give you this: his last 4 games of the season, and keep in mind these 4 games were interrupted in the middle by an injury. He missed Week 14 against Buffalo and Week 15 against New England, but Week 12 he had 26 points. Week 13 he had 21 points. Week 16 he had 10 points. Week 17 he had 29.5. So he scored over 20 in 3 of his final 4 games last year. And you never know, if he hadn't gotten injured in there, maybe they would have just kept it rolling a little bit. Maybe that game in Week 16 when he came back against the Raiders just wasn't all the way there yet. He had 11 carries for 26 yards and a touchdown. Keep in mind, the Raiders had a very good defense last year too. So I don't know. I like Pacheco. I think they're going to lean on him a lot. I don't think he's like a franchise type Derrick Henry running back where they're like, we got to keep this guy fresh for years to come. I could see them just running him into the ground for the next couple of years and then just, letting him hit free agency or whatever. I don't know. The Chiefs, I think, are going to be good again. They're the back-to-back Super Bowl champion. I think they're going to use him a lot. I like Pacheco as a player. I just have him ranked pretty high there for that reason alone.
Yeah, I mean, same thing for me, though, too. I mean, he's on the Chiefs. He's with a quarterback that can move the offense down the field, put him in a position to score. I think Isaiah Pacheco is still very much coming into his own. He's still a young player. I think this is like the year where we really start to see more of like his peak.
I'm with you. Next up, our 13th ranked running back, Rachaad White. Number 12 for me, number 13 for Kai, number 16 for Dylan. Last year, played all 17 games. He had 272 carries for 990 yards, 6 touchdowns, and 64 catches for 549 yards and 3 touchdowns. I think Rashad White was starting to come into his own a little bit more towards the end of the season last year. Let me look up at his fantasy stats real quick. From week 9 or actually we'll go with week 8 here. 17, 27, 17, 17, 13, 19, 21, 21, 19, 8, and then 13 again. So I mean, he started off a little mid, like his first few games of the year was 6, 21, 7, 10, and 6 and 15. So he's kind of like whatever to start off. And then he really started hitting it off, I think, with Baker Mayfield. Did a lot of damage through the passing game. He's a big PPR guy. I love Rashad White. I almost had him even higher than this, honestly. I just really love his talent. Going into last season, I was like, I don't know if Rashad White's that good. I was fucking wrong. He's a very good running back. He's fast. He's dynamic. Good hands. I think Rashad White's going to have a very good season.
I think he's going to get better, honestly.
Yeah, it would not shock me if he broke the top 10. He's my number 12 running back, but like I was like really thinking like I almost want to rank this guy higher. I think he's just a really good PPR back. Go ahead, Kai.
Yeah, so I mean, like last season, as you see, like he wasn't very efficient running the ball, but he gets a lot of opportunity, which is what I do like. So you have to imagine that the efficiency will go up next season as he comes more into his own because he's also a young player. But then you also have the pass catching role that he has. Like 64 receptions is amazing. 500 yards, 3 touchdowns. Like I'll take that any day.
Yeah,
I feel like he got more efficient in the later half of the season. Like week 12, this is just yards per carry. He had 6.6 in week 12, 4.2, 4.2. Then he had one under 2 against the Jaguars, but he did have a touchdown that game. Geez, 20 carries for 39 yards and a touchdown. That's pretty tough.
So even better is like I love when players hit their stride at the end of a season, and then when they go into next season, it feels like it continues over.
Dude, he was the number 4 running back last year. That's crazy.
Pass catching.
That is really crazy. It is pass catching, dude, and the only thing that scares me off of Rashad White is the inefficiency. And 272 carries for 3.45 yards per carry.
Right? That's going to go up. It has
like
to
I said, though, a lot of that was from the early season, though. Like early in the season, he was hitting like 2s a lot in yards per carry, where he started getting into the 4s, 5s, 6s later in the season.
Which is fair.
It's more like tale of 2 halves of the same season for him.
I think the one thing that maybe comes down for him is the carries. Like, I don't know if they're just going to be funneling, 270 more carries into a guy if he does struggle between the tackles. Maybe they give Bucky Davis a shot.
Bucky Davis.
They do have Chase Edmonds. Like, they have a couple other running backs that they can kind of and I believe, like, wasn't Sean Tucker a draft pick of theirs?
He is still on that team, I believe, yes. Chase Edmonds is there as well.
And it's just like, it just maybe seems like the Buccaneers maybe had offensive line woes last year because their run game was very stagnant. Like, they just ran the ball to kind of set up the pass with Baker Mayfield. If he can keep on with the receiving, like, workload, 60 catches for 500 plus yards is not bad for a running back. So if he can keep that up, I think maybe he could buoy those numbers a little bit. But I definitely think the anomaly is him being the RB4 last year.
Okay. Next up, number 14 on our list, Josh Jacobs. He was number 16 for me, number 12 for Kai, number 11 for Dylan. I'm going to let Dylan put his headphones in. I want to start with you, Dylan, because I feel like you were not a big Josh Jacobs fan last year at all. I believe you said he sucks multiple times on this podcast, but yet you are the highest on him of the 3 of us. So please just explain your reasoning.
It's the change of scenery.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
He is the RB1 in Green Bay. And that's like, he's going
Doesn't mean much. Doesn't mean much.
I mean, he's going into maybe a better situation offensively for him. I feel like the Raiders kind of were struggling. Like, they didn't really have and the Raiders still don't have their quarterback yet. So I think that might have dug into Josh Jacobs.
Why do you hate Gardner Minshew so bad, dude?
Oh, you would even agree he's not the Raiders quarterback of the future.
I mean, he's the Raiders quarterback of the present, brother. I don't look at the future. Yeah.
Typical.
Today is a gift. I must enjoy today.
I just think the change of scenery will be good. He's definitely going to get 200 plus carries for the Packers. And he's a good touchdown scorer. Like he usually scores a good amount of touchdowns in his career, season over season. So he has little to no competition in the backfield, and he has shown that he's able to be a receiving threat as well.
You sure about that?
I am.
You sure about that's not why?
Are you familiar with how Matt LaFleur runs his offense?
Oh,
Have
I
you
know
have
AJ.
you owned any Packers running backs in the recent
That's
years in
the
fantasy?
that's the only thing that would make me hesitate on Josh Jacobs. But other than that, I am in complete agreement with Dylan. Like much better situation, new scenery, probably a better offensive line too. As far as I know, I think the Packers have a pretty good O line. So
It's better than the Raiders, yeah.
yeah, so I mean, the path is laid out for this to be a great season for Josh Jacobs. But of course, at the end of the day, like you said, it's up to Matt LaFleur.
I mean, I've owned Aaron Jones a few times in fantasy,
Me
and
too,
Matt
brother.
LaFleur just loves to rain on some parades, man. He fucking loves it, and I get it. He's just trying to win football games. You know, he's what Arthur Smith thought he was, where it's like this isn't fantasy football. Yeah, Matt LaFleur actually does that and actually wins games. So whatever. I guess I respect it in a football sense, but it is aggravating as a fantasy player, especially when you're in the moment. And keep in mind, Josh Jacobs did not have that good of a year last year. I don't think it was on him. I do think the Raiders' offense was just extremely stagnant. Probably one of the worst offenses I've seen in a while. Honestly, just having trouble moving the ball with Aiden O'Connell.
Mhm.
I don't know, man. The fact that I'm not totally convinced that Jacobs just isn't bad. I don't think it was on him last year, but I don't know. Maybe he has declined. So if he has declined, plus Matt LaFleur's usage, because AJ Dillon is going to get work. Matt LaFleur likes using A.J. Dillon. It doesn't make any sense. He's not a good football player, but he is going to get touches. And they also have Marshawn Lloyd, who maybe he doesn't get any work at all this year, but I think he might. And maybe he doesn't cut into Jacobs at all. Keep in mind, Marshawn Lloyd has a horrible fumbling problem. At least in college, he did. So if he comes on the field and fumbles a couple times, he probably won't be getting playing time. But if he does end up fixing that, I mean, I know you can coach fumbling out of a player. If he can fix that in the NFL, Marshawn Lloyd is talented enough to take carries away from Josh Jacobs as well. So if Matt LaFleur has 3 running backs that he thinks he can use, Josh Jacobs might not touch the ball 20 times in a game at all.
Yeah.
And I just don't know if that's going to be all that good. So I keep in mind he did have a down year last year and still had 14 touchdowns combined between rushing and receiving. So maybe I'm talking out of my ass and I've just been burnt by Matt LaFleur too many times, but I just don't quite trust the Packers. Would I not draft Josh Jacobs? Of course I would, but I'm just hesitant about Matt LaFleur.
He also missed 4 games.
He did.
Yeah. And
but I mean, if you want to talk about inefficiency though, 3.45 yards per carry is not good.
How do you guys feel about his ADP? Like, it's a lot lower than guys like Mixon and Pacheco, and I personally think I might take Mixon over Jacobs.
Oh, I absolutely would.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would too.
Yeah.
My only thing with Josh Jacobs is the change of scenery is good for guys sometimes. And this might be the best offense Josh Jacobs has ever played in.
Mm-hmm.
It likely will be. Yeah.
And the best quarterback he's ever played with possibly as well. Because I would already say that maybe Jordan Love has shown that he's better than Derek Carr was ever.
I want Jordan Love. I would say Jordan Love should prove it one more time just to make sure that it wasn't a fluke. I agree with you. I believe that Jordan Love will be better than Derek Carr was. Yes.
Yeah. So maybe this is all good for him. And when we're talking about like league winners, Josh Jacobs could be that because it could be maybe you get him for cheap in the 4th, 5th, 6th round.
Mm-hmm.
And then what you have, if your roster construction is nice, he could be your flex. And if you're telling me that I could put Josh Jacobs in my flex and build around that, like have a strong running back core, then I'm really loving that.
Yeah.
Like I don't look at Josh Jacobs as an RB1. He's an RB2. You know, I rank all my RB1s, I believe, in the top 10. And then starting from there, you start getting fringe guys. So Josh Jacobs at RB2, I'll take that too.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Yeah. Number 15 on our board, James Cook. Jimmy Cook. Number 12 running back in fantasy last season. In 17 games played, he had 237 carries for 1,122 yards and 2 touchdowns, 44 catches, 445 yards, 4 touchdowns. We're all pretty the same on Jimmy Cook here. 15 for me and Kai. Kai and I have agreed a lot here. 15 for me and Kai, 14 for Dylan. I feel like you're drafting him for potential, obviously. The Bills have a good offense. He looked good in the second half of the season last year. He seems like he's a good player. I don't think the Bills have a whole lot of competition in that backfield with him, do they? Am I forgetting about somebody? Do they have any other decent running back in that backfield?
I don't think that they have like a lot of competition for him.
So in theory, this would be really good. Let's see their depth chart. They have Ray Davis and Ty Johnson and Frank Gore Jr., Darrington Evans. So I would say he has little to no competition. Honestly, I don't think he's going to be getting Kyron Williams snap percentage, but I think James Cook probably is in line for a huge breakout season. Honestly,
So,
maybe he should be higher on our list than whatever he is, 15.
So I'm not going to put him higher on this list for myself personally, just because, as you saw with last year, only 2 rushing touchdowns. And you know why that is? It's because there's a guy named Josh Allen who likes to steal a lot of rushing touchdowns on his own. So that's one thing that would make me hesitate on drafting James Cook. I would feel kind of nervous about it, honestly, just because of that. But other than that, I absolutely love the talent of James Cook. He's a fantastic runner. He's a receiving threat too. So that's the only thing that would make me hesitate, though, is just the fact that Josh Allen is a rushing quarterback.
Fair enough.
I love the efficiency, the opportunity, and you have to imagine
The touchdowns
that
go up.
his touchdowns go up a little bit, and that could break him into the top 10. But I'm not projecting him to have much better of a season. I don't think he'll have much better of a season than he had last year. Those are pretty damn good numbers.
Yeah.
But if he gets an extra 4 touchdowns, that does bolster him into the top 10. But with how the Bills are going to play this year, I'm not really sure their style of play. Like, their offense has changed a lot. So we'll have to see how much of that runs through James Cook. But I don't think you could run very much more through him than you did last year. I don't think he's an ultra durable running back. I think you kind of saw how the Bills used him last year sporadically. Like, they had him on the field, off the field in situational football. So we'll see. We'll see how that goes going forward.
That's fair. You got any last words, Kai?
No, I pretty much said everything.
Number 16 for us is Alvin Kamara. This is another one that I thought maybe should be a little higher for me. I had him at 14. Dylan had him at 14 as well. Kai has him at 17. My argument for Kamara was that he came back and was incredibly consistent last year. I feel like people aren't really quite remembering that. I don't know. He came back from the suspension and he was like week in and week out. He was giving you a lot of receptions because Carr was just dumping it down to him constantly. Kamara still looked good. He still looked like Kamara. It didn't look like he lost a step or anything like that. So if he's still Kamara again this year, and Derek Carr's still dumping balls down to him, like checking down, like I don't know. I think Kamara's potentially going to have another really good season.
Oh yeah.
I think 14 might be even too low that me and Dylan have him on. Kai has him at 17. Explain yourself, Kai.
Yeah, it's just, I don't know. That's something about the Saints offense. I really don't trust it. I know Derek Carr dumps it off to Kamara like crazy, and that's strictly probably the only reason why I would draft Kamara. I do think his rushing over the years has gone down in efficiency, just like bit by bit. Kind of expect that to continue this year. Saints like to use a lot of different weird guys at the goal line too. Taysom Hill, for instance, so that would also scare me off a little bit. But like I said, I would strictly draft Kamara just for the receiving chops. I do like where his ADP is at currently in the late 7th round. I would take Kamara as my fringe RB2/flex guy, you know?
He only had 2 single-digit scoring games the entire year, and it was his last 2 games of the season. Sad. Championship rounds of fantasy. Yeah. But other than that, I mean, he was fantastic. When he got back in week 4, 21, 18, 17, 29, 27, 11, 18, 15, 28, 13, 16, 8, 6. I mean, those are good numbers, dude, until the very end.
Those are RB2 numbers right there.
And it's not like he had like a ton of touchdowns or anything. He's not touchdown dependent at all, really. He had 5 rushing touchdowns and 1 receiving touchdown. So he had that good of a season without really scoring that many touchdowns because the Saints are going to Saint. But I think I don't know. I just like I said, the receiving numbers alone is worth drafting. I mean, he had double-digit targets twice last year, 14 targets twice.
Yeah,
which is really good.
Yeah,
and to have missed 4 games. Was it due to his suspension, right?
Yeah.
He missed the last game of the year. I don't know what that was because the Saints didn't make the playoffs. So he missed week 18. I don't remember why that was, and then he was suspended the first 3. Yeah.
Okay, so to finish as the RB11 and produce 75 receptions in 13 games is pretty good. I mean, if you're looking at giving him an extra 4 games, if you just took his numbers last year and added 4 games, he's 200 carries, roughly 800 yards. You have to give him a touchdown. 100 catches, you think Alvin Kamara would have had if he played those 3 games?
Yeah.
I would say you can give him 25 catches in 3 games.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if I'm looking at a guy who's like kind of misranked a little bit, it might be Alvin Kamara. He could easily be the number by the end of this season. He could be the number 5, 6, 7 running back in fantasy, just off of his play style. He's never been a big carries guy. He's never had like those 300 carry seasons. He's very much played that slasher type role. Like he has been known as one of the greater receiving threats at running back, and since I've been a fan of football, for sure.
Do you guys have his stats pulled up right now by any chance? Don't pull them up if you don't.
I don't.
Okay, yeah, I don't.
How many times has he ran for 1,000 yards in his career? Rushed for 1,000 yards?
I would say none.
I'm gonna
Kai?
say 1. I'm gonna say 1.
0 times.
Okay.
Yeah,
Zero
so he's always
times.
been in the 900s.
It's because of the past.
He's only got
catching.
900 one time.
Yeah.
Wow.
Career high 932. His second was 898.
I imagine a lot more
there.
touchdowns in those years too.
He had, let's see, in the year that he went for 932 yards, he had 16 rushing and 5 receiving touchdowns.
Yeah.
Was that
And
the
then-
6 touchdown game at the end of the year?
I assume so. Yeah. There's only
That was
three.
in the-
There's only 3 seasons he's had more than 6 rushing touchdowns. Period.
Yeah, he's not getting his numbers through on the ground at all.
Yeah.
Rarely, like maybe 30% of his fantasy production has been rushing. You
Mhm.
know, maybe 40%. But as long as he's on the field, dude, he's gonna be catching passes. He's gonna be doing his thing, dude.
Also, like, does he have any competition? Because there's like Jamal Williams did not look very good last year. I know they didn't really use him a whole lot, but maybe there's a reason why they didn't use him a whole lot, because he did lead the league in rushing the year before, and then they just chose not to really use him ever.
Taysom Hill.
Yeah, I guess, but like, I don't know. They got Jamal, they got Taysom, they got Kendre Miller, who, I mean, I has a lot of potential, but he's also got like injury concerns and whatnot too. So I don't know that I could see his competition for carries and touches not being that competitive. So I don't know. I would absolutely draft Alvin Kamara. Like I said, I think 14 might be entirely too low for him. So he's currently our 16 running back. We'll see how that moves up or down in the coming weeks before the season starts. Number 17, Kenneth Walker III. So I wouldn't say all of us are all over the place, but Kai is drastically different than what Dylan and I have him at. I'm at 18. Dylan's at 17. Kai, you have him at 11. I'm going to go ahead and let you start here. Why do you like Kenneth Walker so much that you have him ranked 11th?
I just think he's just like one of those like really good like pure running backs. You know, I think his workload is going to increase this year. You know, we saw Zach Charbonnet come in and didn't even really make an impact to stealing away Kenneth Walker's job. So I kind of continue to see that. I kind of expect that formula to continue into next season. I expect Walker to get a little bit more carries, and I kind of expect his receiving game to remain about the same. So
I'm going to be honest with you. I don't know if Kenneth Walker's all that good.
I like him.
He's
I-
good, but
I don't think he's bad. I just don't know if he's as good as what we thought has been. You look at his stats last year; they're really not that good. He had a few like really, really good games, but like especially in like the mid to late part of the season, he had a lot of single-digit games, man. Like inefficient running games. Like look at like Week 9 against Baltimore, 9 carries, 16 yards. Week 11 against the Rams, 4 carries, 18 yards. Week 14 against the Niners, 8 carries, 21 yards. Week 16 against the Titans, 16 carries, 54 yards. I mean, like there was a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 week span where he did not score a rushing touchdown last year. Granted, he was injured for 2 of those games, but they were also against the Niners and the Cowboys, 2 pretty good rush defenses. So would he have scored in those games? I don't know. I also think Zach Charbonnet, even though he didn't really show it a whole lot on the field, I do think he's a good running back, and I think he's going to get better this year too, and I think he's going to continue to take touches away from Kenneth Walker personally. So Kenneth Walker's really not a PPR back. Rushing wise, he really didn't have that many good games last year, and I think Charbonnet is going to be better this year. I'm out on Kenneth Walker. I'm not touching him personally. I don't like him this year. Dylan, how do you feel about him?
I feel the same. And I mean, he had games last year: 10 carries, 8 carries, 4 carries, 9 carries, 8 carries, 12 carries. It's not really what you want from a running back when it comes to fantasy football. And I would say I have him ranked where I have him, for the same reason why Kai has him ranked where he has him. He's more of a traditional running back. He's going to get carries. but he's highly inefficient. Like he
Mhm.
is definitely buoyed by explosive games. Like 8 yards a carry, he has games where he's over 5, but then he has games where he's in the 3s and the 1s and the 2s. And those are usually those stinkers. And I don't want stinker. Dude, 8 carries for 21 yards against it was against San Francisco, but 9 carries for 16 yards, 4 carries for 18 yards. Those are just the back-breaking games where you're expecting this guy to get you 10 points, can't even get you 5 points. So I honestly think he'll probably rank the same as he did last year. He's an RB. He's a low end RB2 for me, straight up. And like I'm avoiding him in drafts this year for sure.
Here's a stat for you. He had 8 rushing touchdowns last year. He had half of those in weeks 2 and 3.
Yeah.
He had 2 in week 2 against the Lions. He had 2 in week 3 against the Panthers.
Yeah, it's like what Dylan said, buoyed by big games.
I mean, not only that, buoyed by big games early in the season too. So he only had 4 touchdowns the following, 15 weeks. Like that's not good. And he only had 1 receiving touchdown last year. So he only had 5 the rest of the season. So
we also have to remember
the
the Seahawks kind of stank last year too. So
I mean,
they were all right.
Are they going to be better this year?
I think they'll be slightly better.
I don't.
He only had 1 game last year over 100 yards. And it took him 26 carries to do it. He is the polar opposite of Devon Achane. He's the polar opposite of like these explosive guys. He's not getting you a lot of explosive plays.
Yeah.
And by the way, that one game there where he had 100 yards, he had 0 touchdowns. And he had 2 catches for 6 yards. So it's not like it's not like he was helping you anywhere. It's not like he had a great game that game. He just had a lot of rushing yards. So yeah, I'm out on Ken Walker. I'm with you, Dylan. Next up, our 18th ranked running back, Aaron Jones. I have him at 20. Kai has him at 20. Quick hobby of me, Kai. Jeez. 16 for Dylan. Last year in 11 games, he had 142 carries for 656 yards and 2 touchdowns, 30 catches for 233 yards and 1 touchdown. I think we all really like Aaron Jones. I mean, I've phoned him a couple of times. I always feel like he just was hindered a little bit by Matt LaFleur's usage of him. Personally, I think he's a much better running back than what his fantasy numbers have shown. And it's not like he's had a bad fantasy numbers. He's had good fantasy numbers, and he's even better than that personally. I also think he's on a little bit of a decline probably in his career. He hasn't shown it on the field yet, but just knowing how running backs age, I'm sure we're getting close to that. It is a new team. I would say a worse offense personally with the quarterback situation going on. I mean, we don't know how J.J. McCarthy's going to be, but imagine it's probably going to be worse off than what Kirk Cousins was, in the Viking, or worse, or I guess it would be worse than Jordan Love was. I don't know. I would draft Aaron Jones. I don't feel great about it. I also think Ty Chandler is going to get run, by the way. So I don't know if this is going to be a full Aaron Jones offense. I think it's going to be a 50-50 type thing where Ty Chandler is getting a lot more work than what people are expecting him to, I think, right now. How do you feel about this guy?
Yeah, it's a weird one to me because it's like I personally love the talent of Aaron Jones, and I'm hoping that a new change of scenery does good for him. But at the same time, though, this is an offense bringing in a new rookie quarterback along with Sam Darnold. While that might make them maybe lean on the run a little bit more, like you did mention, Ty Chandler is going to be a factor this year, I believe. There are a lot of weapons in the passing game for the Vikings too, so I don't even know if will Aaron Jones get the same type of pass work that he's usually known for. I'm not sure. In the early 8th round, I probably would take I would probably take him as my flex, just to like an interchangeable flex, and just start him on the weeks where I think the matchup is good. But other than that, might be a little out on him.
I think you could even talk yourself into him being your RB2. I don't think it'd be favorable, but I
don't know.
No, I would.
Yeah, I would too.
I'd be a little nervous, to be honest.
You don't need to have a good RB2 right away. No. So even if he doesn't work out, you could just find another one down the road, a rookie or something, or maybe somebody else you draft later on is better than what their draft position was going to be. I would take Aaron Jones, just thinking that he might have a good season.
Yeah, he missed a lot of time last year, man.
He always does.
He only played 11 games, but what I think gets lost in this is, you guys saw him in the playoffs last year, right?
Oh yeah,
it's great.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Killed the Cowboys.
Two 100-yard rushing games. You know what I mean? He killed the Cowboys, and then he also played pretty well against the Niners.
And also, right before those playoffs, sorry to interrupt you, right before those playoffs happened too, his only 3 100-yard rushing games were the 3 weeks right before the playoffs. So he like heated up right at that moment and started playing like his best football of the season by a mile. Sorry, Dylan, go ahead.
That's what I'm looking for. It's like, I think him walking into the Vikings, I think he's going to get just enough work for Aaron Jones to do good. I mean, it is the twilight of his career. We'll admit that. He's 29, I believe, maybe 30 now. So this is going to be his last hurrah, and he showed that he definitely still has gas in the tank. He has a lot of gas in the tank, especially later in the season, like he showed last year. So, yeah, I'm fine with Aaron Jones in my RB2. I'm fine with him at my flex as well. If you can have Aaron Jones in your flex position going into week 1 this year, you're going to feel really good about that.
Yeah.
And if you do draft Aaron Jones to be like your RB2, go get Ty Chandler because one of those guys is going to have a good season, if not both of them. So I don't know which one it is. I would not be shocked if Ty Chandler outplayed Aaron Jones personally. So go get Ty Chandler if you draft Aaron Jones. I think you're going to be perfectly fine either way. Sorry,
Aaron
Guy,
Jones
go
is
ahead.
going to be on the field for sure.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, I like what Dylan brought up with, or was it you, Brian, where he like popped off at the end of the season? Like that is fantastic. That's a fantastic plan to have in the back of your mind if you think you're going to make playoffs, and then now you have Aaron Jones for playoff fantasy football.
There you go.
Yeah.
All right. Next up, number 19, James Conner. 21 for me, 18 for Kai, 20 for Dylan. His current ADP is early 9th. In 13 games played last year, 208 carries for 1,040 yards and 7 touchdowns, 27 catches, 165 yards, 2 touchdowns. I think we all think James Conner is probably going to be productive again, but the question is, how much does Trey Benson eat into his work? I think that's the big question mark here with James Conner. Kai, how do you feel about those two running backs together?
It really it's tough. I mean, I still would take I would still take James Conner as like my RB2 or flex because I do love his ADP right now. I think that's really cheap for him. But yeah, Trey Benson is definitely gonna have to be in the back of your mind when you draft James Conner. Hell, you might as well even draft Trey Benson too, just in case. But other than that, I love James Conner when he is on the field and when he is healthy. He's one of the most efficient running backs out there. Like 5 yards per carry last season, that's amazing. He does have some receiving chops. Like he came into this league being like a big receiving threat in addition to his running, but the receiving threat has kind of waned down over the years. But we did see it in spot flashes last season.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, man. James Conner has always been that guy that misses a little bit of time. He doesn't get a ton of carries. Like he hovers around 200 carries a year. It's never really more than that. But man, this guy has shown flashes in the past and during seasons to be a touchdown machine. I think he had 15 touchdowns in 2021.
Mm-hmm.
So any given day, any given season, I mean, you could be looking at James Conner 10 plus touchdowns. And last year was his worst year for receiving by a good margin. Like he had, I mean,
we also have to remember that Kyler was out for the first portion of the year too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think Kyler helps that offense obviously move better too.
I think what we will be looking at is another James Conner year. Like he's an RB2, he's going to get you your touchdowns, but he is getting to the point in his career where a guy like Trey Benson is going to come in and show flashes. You know, he's going to be a little bit more athletic. He's going to open up that offense a little bit more. Has a lot of the Monty Gibbs feel to it. Like how much is Benson going to actually come in and take?
I think they're both going to be usable at least at some point in the season. If not the whole entire season, at some point Trey Benson will be usable. I think James Conner is going to be usable for most of the season too. I think he's going to have a fine year. I don't know how many more years he has left, but I think this year will be a fine year for James Conner. I wouldn't have any issue drafting him. I don't know if I would I'd rather have like Aaron Jones as my RB2 than James Conner personally. I don't know if I would like James Conner as my RB2. RB3 though, I would take James Conner. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
Okay, last for today, number 20. David Montgomery, 19 for me, 23 for Kai, 21 for Dylan. Last year, 14 games played, he had 219 carries, 1,015 yards, 13 touchdowns, 16 catches for 117 yards. The Lions have shown that they can use Monty and Gibbs together and be productive for both of them. They showed in the second half of the season that they can be both productive on the same offense. Do you think David Montgomery is going to be as productive as he was last year?
That's specifically why I have him ranked a little bit lower, just because I do think Gibbs' role is going to increase significantly more than it was last year, and just naturally that's going to push Monty's workload down just a tad bit. I'm still going to say maybe like I'm going to say like 190 carries, like 180 carries in that range.
Okay, yeah, he had 219 carries last year, so a little step down. I could see that happening too.
If Monty's healthy the whole year, there's no way he doesn't get 200 carries.
Okay.
I mean, in that offense, you got to imagine Detroit's going to run the ball, and they're not going to funnel it through Jahmyr Gibbs. This guy runs extremely hard. He's obviously, I think, Dan Campbell's favorite player on his offense. This guy is the heart of that offense. He runs extremely hard, which leads him to miss some games. And I think the one thing that kind of hampers his ranking a little bit is that risk of missing games. Because he had the best year of his career last year, and he was completely phased out of the passing game. Like,
you're right.
He's not an existent passing threat in that Lions offense. So I think that's gonna maybe keep him in that low end RB2 game. But he's gonna get action. He's gonna be on the field for Detroit.
Last year, he only had 3 games where he did not score a touchdown, and one of them was a game where he got injured against Tampa Bay. So really, he only finished 2 games where he didn't score a touchdown last year. Pretty good. One against the Bears, one against the Broncos, back-to-back weeks actually, week 14 and week 15. I mean, pretty good. I mean, a little touchdown dependent. Let's not get it twisted. David Montgomery is very touchdown dependent, especially I think this year with Gibbs. Like Dylan just said, he's non-existent in the receiving game. So that's all Jahmyr Gibbs' game right there. So like David Montgomery is kind of like your prototypical non-PPR back then. So if he's not scoring a touchdown, he might only get you like 8 points, even if he had a really good game. If he got 11 carries for 85 yards, you're like, wow, he had a really good game, but that's not a good fantasy game. So I would say it's a little risky if you think David Montgomery is going to be like the goal line guy, which I kind of think he is again. Dan Campbell likes using David Montgomery. So if you think he's going to get a lot of touchdowns, draft David Montgomery. If you don't think he's going to get a lot of touchdowns and you think that's all going to go to Jahmyr Gibbs this year, then stay away from him. But I think he's going to be usable enough in the goal line that David Montgomery will be viable for fantasy.
I would say this is like a good handcuff to have. Like, you're obviously, I don't think, going to be able to play both of these guys. I think maybe it's not a good idea to like play both of them, but if one of them is injured for a game, that just tells you a lot of what's going to happen. If Jahmyr Gibbs misses time, David Montgomery is now RB1 on that offense because he's going to be getting 25, 30 carries a game.
Yeah.
Let me play devil's advocate for that. So would you, if you want to handcuff those guys together, you're going to have to spend a high draft pick on David Montgomery, higher than most people would feel comfortable for a handcuff. Because David Montgomery, I mean, it says his ADP is 9th round. I don't expect David Montgomery to go in the 9th. Do you? I don't know. We have him as an RB2. We have him as an RB2, ranked as an RB2, 20th, like mid 9th round. I think that's going to go up as we get closer to drafts. Personally, I don't know how you guys feel about that. I usually can't get RB2 in the 9th round, right? Or am I tripping?
Yeah, I kind of see him more as like an RB, like 3 flex consideration kind of player. If you're drafting, if he slides to the 9th round and you are looking for depth on your offense, I think you pick David Montgomery. But it is it's a shaky handcuff situation. You don't know if you actually want to do it. It's like the Chubb and Hunt situation. It's like they dig into each other a little bit too much to have them both on your team, because then you might be waffling on yourself.
It could also be a similar situation to, do you remember the year where it used to be Mark Ingram and Alvin Kamara as the 2 running backs for the Saints? Yeah. Like, there was weeks where you could start them both. Maybe that's the same situation here. I mean, you take David Montgomery as your RB3/flex, and in addition to that, he's a handcuff if you also have Gibbs, and there's going to be weeks where you could start them both, you know?
I would never feel comfortable starting both personally. Yeah.
I'm just saying it does work sometimes. There are moments where you can start them both.
I feel like that's not a strategy to build your team around.
Oh,
though.
absolutely
So
not,
if you're going into drafts trying to get both of them to play both of them, that I think that's silly. That's foolish.
But let's put it this way. Let's say like you have a week coming up and you have both of these guys and they're playing like, let's say, the worst rushing defense in the league. Like that's a moment where you could feel comfortable starting both of them.
It's fair enough.
Well, a hot hand situation. Maybe Jahmyr Gibbs takes over for 2 or 3 games and is explosive, and then Monty has a couple games where he's explosive. So it's definitely a sticky situation, but he's definitely rosterable. David Montgomery.
All right, that's it for this week. We'll continue this next week, 21 through 40 for our running backs.